Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for this privilege to serve you and to be involved in this great and mighty work. We thank you for all these opportunities and privileges, and we ask as we begin that you would pour out your Holy Spirit upon us and upon those who are joined with us. We ask for the presence of your holy angels to be with us also, to guide and direct our minds. Please help us to get more comfortable doing these presentations and grow in your knowledge and grace, that your name may be glorified. We ask for the listeners also that they may be blessed as well, that we may do your will in this great and mighty work. We ask these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Okay, so this presentation in particular, hold on, baby, here. Sorry. Was a presentation that really interested me for a variety of reasons, particularly that it shows the progression of the two factions of Protestantism, and also how conspiracy theories played a role in the elections and how it was used as a tool in those elections, even during the time of slavery and so on. Now, this presentation, I think, is one of three. There's two other presentations after this that continue this, and it's named, I believe, Do I Have Freedom number 1 and Do I Have Freedom number 2? But it still picks up on this presentation. So I will begin, and as I go along, if anyone has any comments or anything to say, please feel free to interrupt so we can discuss and internalize these messages. Okay, so State Nationalism by Tess Lambert. This was done the 27th of the 6th month, 2020. So this is about possibly the last that I will be doing for this series for about a month, but others will be presenting. So also real quick before I begin, I don't know how long I will be going, but if it's a longer the presentation is about an hour and a half, and Elder Tess does it pretty quickly. Now I'll probably be going a lot slower than her, so it could very well take, I don't know, maybe even 2 hours. So maybe I should stop around maybe 7? What time do we end?
We usually go till 8, so you're good.
Oh, okay, good. Okay, so
if you're okay with that.
Yes, definitely. So I wanted to try and wrap up some thoughts today. You can see that I've erased most of the board, and I was really sad to lose our growing list of conspiracy theories. I was going quite fond of our growing list of conspiracy theories. It seems that new ones could be added every week. I think we could have a whole board just of conspiracy theories if we put our minds to it and how they operate. We've lost our portion on the top left corner showing the compare and contrast between ancient Israel and modern Israel. The ancient idolatry and the modern idolatry through those in each history, 3 particular dispensations, particularly considering the Alpha and the Omega. Now we looked a lot at those lines and also through the lens of progression, which we will do quite a lot of this morning. So we believed in this, but there are 2 different definitions of what that looks like, speaking of the end of the world. One is saying that the threat is globalism. So here you see Fox News, and it will tell you that the threat is globalism. CNN, on the contrary, will tell you that the threat is unilateralism. Fox will tell you the threat is globalism. If the threat is globalism, you believe that through conspiracy theories, and Donald Trump becomes your hero. CNN tells you the threat is unilateralism, uni meaning one superpower. You will understand that through the methodology of parable teaching. So, real quick, this uni meaning one superpower, that is the United States outside of the circle, right? So, all the countries of the world are inside the circle, and then the United States is outside the circle, and the United States pulls the strings or controls all the other country of the world. So one of the things that's teaching us is that the democratic system only, the United States only applies that or practices that within its own borders, right? But outside of its border, like democracy, worldwide democracy, the United States doesn't believe in that. Did I say that right? Okay.
Yeah, that sounds right.
So just one example is World War I plus World War II equals World War III. That's a triple application of prophecy. So you believe in this, Trump becomes the dictator. So while we believe the same thing, what you believe that looks like changes your perspective of where the threat is going to come from. So, again, I emphasize this word threat here because every so often I'll be confronted with someone around my work, and many people will share with me what they believe to be a problem in the world. But I always use this word here, threat. Now, is that the final threat? And so when you use that word, it really sparks an interest or a thought in those who are working with, because the threat here is what we need to understand, what the threat is at the end of the world.
That totally makes sense.
When you understand that Donald Trump becomes a dictator, it changes your entire worldview. At the same time, you're not challenging that core conclusion. You can do the same thing with the secret societies. We all believe in secret societies. Protestants believe in secret societies. We show that in 1798 with the Illuminati threat. Conservative Adventists, Walter Vaith, they all believe in secret societies. We believe in secret societies. Okay. We've talked about that when we discussed Dominionism, the Seven Mountain Theology. There's another movement that was how they defined ninja sheep. Now, does anyone remember what she's talking about here? Dominionism and the Seven Mountain Theology. I don't know. I think I forgot exactly what she's referring to. Anyways, there's another movement that was. What's that?
Sister Kathy McGraw did a good study on Dominionism. Well, when she was in rescue, remember? She talked about it then, and then she talked about it again later. But so
Okay.
yes, so yeah.
Dominionism. Okay. And that's another movement that was how they define ninja sheep. The people that they have in these seven mountains that are trying to take over or control the culture of the United States, particularly, we went to Ellen White's quotes to show that. We would define the Ku Klux Klan as a secret society. So both sides believe in secret societies. We disagree on what that looks like. When you understand what that looks like, it changes your expectations of your entire end time worldview. So, putting that to one side at the moment, this is a little bit of a detour in anticipation of the Canadian Zoom camp meeting. For those of you that will be participating, I'd like to suggest a project. Some homework. It's really difficult when we consider the lockdown, the change in travel plans. Schools have been canceled even though we can do some on Zoom. Many camp meetings have been canceled. By now, I was to do at least 3 camp meetings since Portugal. None of them have taken place, so our plans have been very much derailed. We were soon to have an international camp meeting. There was to be schools, weeks of studying together, digging out these lines and truths. So, due to the shutdown, much of these has not been able have not been able to take place, and part of the difficulty is covering in about 1 to 2 presentations a week what we need to be remembering at this time, and I become concerned that we start to lose our place on the lines. So I want to suggest a project to anyone who is willing. Go to the lines that you know of, all the lines that show your experience. If you have copies that someone has done, some people have done online PDF copies. I try to suggest everyone, even if you have those online formally done copies of the lines, draw them yourself. What I'd like you to do or think about doing is put a dot or a little person where you are on those lines. Take each one of them, go through them one by one, and say, this is where I am on the line. So I'll give you some suggestions of where to start. There are many more lines than this, but these are the ones that are in my mind. Take Acts 27. That was the foundational message of the Midnight Cry. It was the increase of knowledge of our latter rain, Sunday law history. There is so much in Acts 27 to explain our experience as Adventists. So take the study of Acts 27. There's 2 lines in that study, the ship of Adramyttium and the ship of Alexandria. For both of them, place yourself on that line. We're going to come back to Acts 27 in just a moment. We all should know where we are in the history of the end of ancient Israel. I want to remind us that you can place yourself there twice. You can do 2 applications, which that with that line. So end of ancient Israel times 2, because in that history we have the baptism and also the cross lining up with the same waymark. Elder Parmenter gave a really good example of that in Portugal, explaining how we do that. The beginning of modern Israel, the history of the Millerites, and I'll explain myself later, but you have at least 2 applications of that. We should be all familiar with. So the beginning of modern Israel times 2. Place yourself on that history twice. 2 different places. It doesn't matter if you make mistakes. Discuss it together. Do it. Discuss it with your brothers and sisters in the message who are around you. At least try to know where you are on these lines. Coming out of those applications, we can't forget the line of the priests and the line of the 144,000. The Diadochi Wars. Place yourself in that history of the Diadochi Wars. 2 world wars, World War I and World War II. Know exactly where you are on the lines of the world wars. This one interest this one's interesting. I'm not sure what people would do with this, but we've been studying this since it was done in October 2018. And I mentioned it a few times since. They're comparing the contrast between the internal and the external. Compare and contrast internal and external, remembering it's an election year. Revolutions. I'm going to lump them all into one. Know where you are in the line of the revolutions, the counterfeit. It's a little like the internal external. Know where you are in that history. So this is about 14 to 15 different lines where you can go to them and you can map yourself. The problem is that when you're missing one of these lines, you're missing part of your experience. There's something about your experience right now that you don't understand, that you won't understand if you're missing your location on any one of these lines. I know that they are not the only lines in existence. There are other important ones as well. Elder Parmenter presenting in Portugal the history of Turkey and Egypt, and he shows where we are in that history, where we stand in 2020. So we should take that line. So there are others, but with these we should all be able to know or at least have on record so that we can check for any one of them to locate yourself on that line. So much that people are struggling with today would be answerable if they knew where they stood on every one of these lines. It is an anchor for our faith. So that's a little bit of a detour because I wanted people to start thinking about that and looking at the prior to the Canadian, to look into that prior to the Canadian camp meeting. Okay, so that's an important uh, thought that she's urging us to put ourselves on the lines continually. That way we know where we stand in each one of these lines. So here we have the two ships. Okay. So coming back to Acts 27, if we were just to remind ourselves about what Acts 27 teaches, it teaches us the experience of the United States, and not just the United States, but Adventism, in two different histories. Sorry, in two different ways. It's going to show you what I will oversimplify and call the negative perspective of these institutions from 1989, and it'll take you all the way down to the Sunday law. It's going to show the United States in Adventism, the United States through Felix and Festus, showing our theme of the United States through Agrippa, Adventism. So you have two different institutions beginning being given a warning message. The first ship, Adramyttium, is showing the negative perspective. It means to abide in death. And it's going to take us through this history of 1989 through the Sunday law. This other ship, that what I will oversimplify and call the positive ship, that actually shows us the problems that the ship faces, how it goes off course, how it doesn't follow directions, how it's hit by the east wind and finally shipwrecked. So there's the negative aspect to this history, but overall it's portraying this ship as a good ship. Is designed to take Paul to his destination in Rome, where he is to spread the gospel. So it's so it has its problems, but it's a positive perspective, and it takes you from 1798. This positive perspective of the ship will show its beginning in 1798. It will go off course in 1863, but it will struggle through its history, fulfilling its job function, and it gives us quite neatly the dispensation of the 144,000, the early reign of the 144,000 that begins in 2001, has an increase of knowledge in 2019, it's formalized in 2021. So this second ship particularly gives us a neat perspective of that early rain dispensation from the 144,000. Both of these ships take you to the same point in time. Both of them take you to the Sunday law, where these two institutions are going to be shipwrecked. These two institutions will fall, the United States and Adventism, both fulfilling and shipwrecked at the Sunday law, both failing or falling or shipwrecked at the Sunday law. So, why am I mentioning that now? Through our studies over the last month, we've been particularly addressing one subject. So, two questions, one subject, all taught through Acts 27, but two specific questions. It took us on our studies to well before 1798. We went right back to 1619. This was a turning point year for the United States. In 1619, does a lamb like beast rise up? No. It's 179 years before 1798. So it's almost a 180 year before the lamb like beast is described as rising up out of the earth. It's a year before the Mayflower even lands in the colonies. So in this year, they're just these small British colonies, and for the very first time, they institute a system of government, a representative government in the colonies. So you have the beginning of representative government. And at the same time as this representative government forms, you have through this representative government within a period of weeks the enaction of a Sunday law and the arrival of slavery. So you have this problem in the United States from very early on. It's not lamb-like in 1619. There's nothing lamb-like about these colonies. There was no religious freedom. There was no freedom. So we can see the United States. It had issues back in 1619. These two subjects that are dealt with first in 1850 and then in 1888 are early in existence. When we come to the United States in Bible prophecy, it's not represented as a lamb-like beast until 1798. They have to go through the revolution, enact a constitution, form a representative government, form the Bill of Rights, etc. So it's demonstrated in Acts 27 as rising up here in 1798. It's going to go through history, the positive line. And what this leaves us with is two particular questions we've been trying to address in our studies. The first question is, what is the sin of the United States? Now write these questions on the board. First question, what is the sin at the Sunday law? I put Sunday law in parentheses. What is the sin of the United States at the Sunday law? What makes it shipwreck at this waymark? Our second question is, the United States falls here at the Sunday law. The Republican horn is broken. We're looking at what that looks like, but our second question is what we are focused on for most of the last month, and that is, why does Adventism fall here at the Sunday law? Why does Adventism fall at the Sunday law? So one question that we've been addressing relates to the institution of the United States. Another question we've been addressing relates to the institution of Adventism. What we're trying to understand is why those two institutions fall at the Sunday law. The United States is going to enact a particular sin. We want to understand what their sin is. Adventism is going to fail When the United States enacts that sin, why do they fail? We have spent most of our time on the second question. Why does Adventism fall at the Sunday law? We understood why it's going to fall at the Sunday law when we compared and contrast, when we go back to ancient Israel and recognize the Apis bull, the sin of idolatry, and the fact that we are following this in the footsteps of apostate Protestantism and have been for quite some time. Our worldview is on this side: one world government, Fox News, of the equation. And this is a side that's going to lead us to the Sunday law and to Adventism's acceptance of it. To understand the first question, I'm putting the second question to one side. So far, we're done with that question. Number two, why does Adventism fall at the Sunday law? The idolatry of the Apis bull, the conspiracy theories, Walter Vaith, and all that we've done. Mary Ralph to Walter Vaith and the conservative worldview. We've dealt with this question as much as we're going to for now. What I want us to look at is, what is the sin of the United States? So this is the direction that we're heading in. To understand that, what we began to do is go back through this history and take our triple application of prophecy. The triple application being 1850 plus 1888 equals the Sunday law in the United States. So America's sin in 1850 plus America's sin in 1888 equals the sin of the United States or America at the Sunday law. You could say this another way. You could say that the account of early writings plus the account of the Great Controversy equals the sin. I had another way, looking at the Ten Commandments. 1850 is crime against who? It's breaking the sixth about our fellow man. 1888 is breaking the what? The fourth, the crime against God. The sixth and the four equals the 10. So you can look at this in different ways. It's 1850 plus 1888 equals the Sunday law. And you also have the six commandments broken, then the fourth commandment's broken, combined to see the 10 commandments broken in their entirety in this dispensation, the end of modern Israel. So there we see 1850 plus 1888 equals the Sunday law. Early writings plus the Great Controversy equals the sin of the Sunday law. And here 6 plus 4 equals 10. The 10 commandments broken. So as we look at these chapters, it's early writings and Great Controversy. It's the sin of Babylon. The scriptures, the safeguard. Those two chapters with some surrounding context combined shows us what the Sunday law looks like today. But we have to remember we're going from literal to spiritual. So this is early writings, slavery, literal application, spiritual. Great Controversy, Sunday laws, literal application, spiritual.
Yeah, I was just kind of thinking as you show it up there, the 6 and the 4 equals the 10 when you think about, is it Paul or James? I think it's James. Maybe somebody remembers better, but when you break one, you break them all. So Christ sums up the commandments on those two. Love the neighbor, love your neighbor, and love God. And on these two, all the commandments hang, right?
Yes.
So when you break one, you break the 6, you break them all.
Yep.
I don't know if that makes sense, but that just kind of ran through my head as you were going through that.
Yeah, because she says here, you break all, it says, looking at the Ten Commandments, okay, where is it? You break them all in its entirety. Where is it?
Yeah,
So, broken in their entirety in
yeah.
this dispensation. Okay, so this is literal. Okay, so this is literal plus literal. These two literal histories are going to give us the spiritual or symbolic. Literal plus literal equals spiritual. So we need to understand all of this to understand the Sunday law in our own time. What I want us to do today is before we consider starting to cut the history of 1619, particularly 1798, the Sunday law, before we start cutting it up into these 1850 and 1888 dispensations. I want us to look at the whole history as one connected history. One of the reasons that conspiracy theories exist is because people cannot recognize that we are dealing with the same issues that have plagued America for over 400 years. The issues being faced today are connected to the issues that have been in existence from the very beginning of the United States as a colony. So for now, forget about cutting the line. We're going to look at this whole history as a progression. Nothing comes out of the blue unexpectedly. Do we know what that phrase means? Coming out of the blue? If you're looking at the sky, nothing is going to suddenly flash out of the blue, out of the sky that you don't see coming. So when I say it's not going to come out of the blue, it's not going to come out of the blue sky without you seeing it on the horizon and seeing its progression, seeing it come to you. We can look back all the way to 1619 and see that Sunday law as it comes to us. It's not going to come as some type of surprise. No, if you're prepared. So we're going to take this line. I'm going to rub out what we've done with Acts 27. I just wanted to do this so we could have a memory to truly understand that what two questions we were trying to answer over the last month. Both questions you can take from Acts 27, where we're dealing with the two institutions and why they fall. What is the sin of the United States at the Sunday law? We're heading in that direction. We spent most of our time focusing on why does Adventism fall here at the Sunday law? Okay, so here's the the lines that she has drawn up there. Now this is just, I think, the first portion of the lines, but it goes on, and she fills it in presentation 2 and 3 after this. Okay, so Nancy's here next to me. She says she wants to read a paragraph as well. I don't think she's ever read on the studies, but I think she
That
wants
would
to
be
read.
great.
Yeah, definitely.
Hi. So I want us to look at the history of the United States all the way back from 1619. It had the first representative government in the colonies. At this first representative government enacted a Sunday law at its conception, and at the same time, weeks apart, so began the slavery within British colonies of the Americas. We'll skip about 170 years. In the history between 1619 1798, we have the American Revolution. They fight for their freedom from Britain. They form a republican government. They enact a constitution and write the Bill of Rights. all of that history leading up to 1798. What they do in history is they make two particular relevant claims to us. First of all, they separate church and state. Second says all men are created equal. Oh, we remember 1798 rises up like a lamb-like beast. You have this issue over the election, John Adams versus Thomas Jefferson. But what this really represented was a split within Protestantism. There is the split within Protestantism through the two great awakenings. You have socially conservative Protestantism following John Adams, and you have this more socially liberal, inspired by the American Revolution, more liberal branch of Protestantism following Thomas Jefferson. In 1798, this conservative branch introduces conspiracy theories, the Illuminati threat to try and take down the enemies of John Adams on both sides of the special spectrum, Hamilton, Jefferson. So you have the introduction of those conspiracy theories. I want us to look at this issue as it progression of subject of say slavery. So both sides of that argument of abolition and for slavery are led by Protestants. We need to remember what particular elder Parmenter taught in Portugal when he discussed this time period and he discussed the writings of Lich. And when Lich talks about the clergy and the public, who are the public? The public are Protestants because everyone in the United States there comes somehow under the concept of being a Protestant. There's a few Catholics, they're not linked, they're persecuted, but essentially everyone is Protestant. If I can be a little bit broad with that. So when you have this huge fight over slavery, both sides of that argument, north south for slavery, the abolition slavery, are both led by different factions of Protestantism. And it's particularly interesting. What I'm not trying to do is cast our line, cut our line. Because I'm not trying to cut our line, I'm not going to try and focus on key waymarks of that history. I'm going to not care about what dates I'm putting with that. I'm just going to put relevant ones for our subject. But I do want to mention this. I used this book in Portugal. It's a book titled America 1844. Religious further westward expansion and the presidential election that transformed the nation.
All right, thank you, Nancy. I'm going to read from page 41, a small section. The year 1831 has been a propitious, is that how you say it? Propitious one for the embryonic abolitionist movement. So in 1831 was a key year in the abolitionist movement. And why is 1831 become so important to us? 1831 to 1833 is our formalization of our message. 1831 to 1833. William Lloyd Garrison founded the newspaper The Liberator in 1831. Abolitionists in Boston founded the New England Anti-Slavery Societies, and slaves led by Nat Turner rose up against their masters in Virginia. Southerners were annoyed by Garrison and the fledgling society. They were scared to death of Nat Turner. So they were annoyed by the anti slavery societies. They were scared by the slave rebellion led by Nat Turner. 2 years later, in 1833, the American Anti Slavery Society was founded. Its leaders soon launched a campaign to petition Congress to end slavery. So 1831 to 1833 are two key waymarks in the beginning of this abolitionist movement. If we go back a little more to 1824, an English Quaker, Elizabeth Coltman Hayrick, published a bold tract titled Immediate, Not Gradual Abolition. She was the first of many devout women to defy the more conservative male leadership in the anti slavery cause in both countries. Her influence was instrumental in the eventual passage of the Emancipation Act of 1833, which began the liberation of the West Indian slaves, although she had died 2 years earlier. So she's an English Quaker. She's on both sides of the Atlantic. She had this influence. In 1833, you have the Emancipation Act beginning the liberation of the West Indian slaves. So whenever you're on their side, whenever you're on either side of the Atlantic, these waymarks still become quite crucial. No less important where the female anti-slavery societies were. Such noted speaker as the Quaker Lucretia Mott, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, the eloquent black Sojourner Truth, and others began their speaking careers. Most favorites of all were Angelina and Sarah Grimmick. Quaker converts from South Carolina who spoke to the horror of the conservative clergy at promiscuous mixed male and female audiences. So it was promiscuous then to have a mixed male and female audience in an auditorium. Women were supposed to only address and teach other women, but these, to the horror of the conservative evangelicals, these women would address mixed audiences. All of this and other efforts by the individuals led to the American Anti-Slavery Society of 1833, an abolitionist society formed by William Lloyd Garrison and Arthur Tappan. Okay.
Frederick Douglass, an escaped slave, was a key leader of this society who often spoke at its meetings. By 1838, the society had 1,350 local chapters with around 250,000 members. When you think of 250,000, that's quite a lot of members to this society when you consider the population in 1838. So I'm not trying to mark waymarks in this history, but I do want to mark 1833 and the Anti-Slavery Society. So now you have two sides starting to form in the United States. Two sides of Protestantism because everyone is Protestant. We talked about Charles Finney. He's a leading Protestant evangelical teacher. He was an abolitionist who led at Oberlin College. This was the first American college to accept women and Blacks as students in addition to white men. From its early years, its faculty and students were active in the abolitionist movement. They participated together with people of the town in biracial efforts to help fugitive slaves on the Underground Railroad, as well as to resist the Fugitive Slave Act, the Sunday law of that time period. These people were on the right side of the Sunday law, so they are Protestants. Charles Finney is a Protestant. So you have these two split sides developing through Protestantism. Protestants, socially conservative, and socially liberal. This all leads up to 1844. In 1844, it all unravels for them. It's that growing tension over decades blew up into a schism in the Presbyterian Church. Those three denominations all divided into, wait, did I skip a line? I
blew
did.
up, yeah.
Oh, sorry about that. Okay, blew up into a schism in the three main Protestant denominations of the United States. It split the Methodist Church, the Baptist Church, and the Presbyterian Church. Those three denominations all divided into essentially along the lines of North and South, and this was the church split. The schism that was not reconcilable that led them directly to the Civil War. They split. Socially conservative were in favor of slavery, socially liberal in favor of abolition. We have to be careful against articles that actually claim to support our beliefs who manipulate this history. Just so we're on our guard, even an article that is fighting against slavery in this history that's saying our Millerite pioneers were against slavery, working leading abolitionists, even ones that support our beliefs, can manipulate Millerite history to support them, and it becomes dangerous. Whether we like the article, whether we like the conspiracy theory, it doesn't matter what it is. If it manipulates history or uses wrong methodology, we should discard it. An article was shared with me this week that said how Millerites were leading abolitionists in this time period, 1798 to 1844, when very few people were fighting against slavery. That's so easily disproven. You don't have 250,000 members of one anti-slavery society at a time period when the population is so much smaller than today, without many people fighting against slavery, many abolitionists who were not Millerites.
That isn't to discount our history of the leading pioneers as being people who stood for equal rights, who stood for the there's a little window. Okay, stood for the slavery, anti-slavery, and recognize that for what it was. They did do that. We should recognize that legacy and what they stood for, and the sin of the United States that they were able to recognize. Any article that even supports our beliefs but manipulates history should be discarded, and we're in growing danger of that. Coming back to this split in Protestantism, in the 19th century, slavery became the most critical moral issue dividing the Baptists in the United States. It really happened through decades of compromise. At the beginning, early in their history prior to 1798, and through into the early Second Great Awakening, Baptists opposed slavery. They never taught that slavery was biblical or not a sin. But as Baptist missionaries went into the South, they struggled to gain a foothold in the South. So they began to buy small incremental steps. They began to compromise in their message. So the next generation of Baptist preachers began to accommodate themselves into Southern society. Rather than challenging slavery the way that they had done at the beginning, they began to interpret certain Bible passages as if they were supporting the practice of slavery. They began to first of all defend it to the North. they began to, first of all, defend it to the North. And this really developed in something we're going to discuss, into something that I'm today going to call nationalistic. The Baptists in the South are um, resenting the Baptists in the North, saying, you need to tell all those sinners down there to stop owning slaves. Those Southern Baptists who don't themselves own slaves, those ministers, they start resenting this intrusion of the North on their territory. So they start to push back against the North and saying, stay out of the South. And while you're at it, explain these verses and these passages. Maybe it isn't so bad after all. Deal with your own problems. Stop criticizing us. So they became to be this defensive. I'm going to call it a type of nationalism between the North and the South. They started preaching to slaves to accept their place and obey their masters. In the 2 decades after the Revolution into the Second Great Awakening, the Southern Baptist preachers abandoned their pleas that the slaves be freed. So this didn't happen at once. It was incremental steps of those Southern ministers, partly because of their nationalism and their resentments of the Southern encroachment on their territory, began to first of all justify slavery, excuse slavery, then more and more defend slavery, and then by the end say it was a God-given mandate. Wow.
In 1844, Basil Manley Sr., president of the University of Alabama, this is the South, a prominent preacher and a major, I don't know what that is.
Planet.
It's covered.
Yeah, it's covered.
Slaves drafted the Alabama resolutions and presented them to the convention. These included the demand that slaveholders be eligible for denominational officers to which the Southern associations contributed financially. So what he's saying is, we Southerners support you financially. These associations, therefore, you must be willing to admit Southern slave owners into denominational offices in the Baptist Church. These resolutions failed to be adopted. So you can see this divide between North and South, just with the churches before it becomes the state, and it's nationalistic in its mentality. The South is saying, we give our money to you, we support you, and yet you're not giving us our leadership positions and authority. In Georgia, the Baptists decide they're going to test the North. They're going to put a test before the North. The North claims neutrality. The North has its issues with compromising. They say they're in this kind of neutral position, so Georgia decides to test them. When a position pens up in the Home Missionary Society, they need a missionary. Georgia recommends a slaveholder. The Home Mission Society's boards refuses to appoint him, noting that missionaries were not allowed to take servants with them. So the missionaries weren't allowed to take a servant and endorse, and if you're not allowed to take a servant, clearly you can't take a slave. So they would not make a decision that had any pure appearance of endorsing slavery, although they did it in this roundabout kind of fashion. Southern Baptists consider this an infringement of their right to determine their own candidates. So this is a north-south tension between northern states and southern states in the Baptist Church. It's nationalistic in its mentality. The South is saying, we give you money, we support you financially. Over the decades before, they more and more come to a position where ancient Israel had, where they see slavery as being mandated by God because of their literal to literal interpretation. Ancient Israel had slaves, modern Israel has slaves. So they're going to use two arguments to defend slavery. One of them is that to not support slavery and not allow us to support slavery in our own states is a violation of our freedom. And they're also going to argue it's a violation of our religious liberty. Remember, we're talking about the South here. Their argument in defense of slavery, their argument against the North. You are violating our freedoms, and you're violating a religious liberty to practice our understanding of Bible history and what God requires of us as a nation, religious freedom and liberty. So this causes the split in the Baptist church, and it's quite similar in the Methodist and Presbyterian churches. There's a few other issues at play there too, but it all centers around the subject of slavery.
We haven't concretely presented the Millerite history in all of its there's a little window that says you're talking and I can't read it. Okay. In all of its main line and what's that?
Yeah, in all of its lines.
Lines, okay. It's on its main lines and all of its fractals. I just want to make a statement and I can prove it to you at another point in time. I'm going to say 1848 is a waymark in Millerite history. I think that might have already been taught somewhere, but 1848 is a waymark. I want to mark 1848. So we're tracking this split within Protestantism, but all of these are Protestants. The government is filled with these Protestant men. You can't really separate these two issues. The title of the book that I was reading from, a sister Suzanne, is America. Wait, the title of the book that I was reading from, is from Sister Susan in America, 1844, Religious Fervor, Westward Expansion, and the Presidential Election that Transformed the Nation. It's an interesting book. It goes through the forming of the Mormon Church, westward expansion, the annexation of Texas, and the election, all of that history. So coming back to that 1844 election, what was the election over? That election was over annexing Texas from Mexico. Do we all kind of remember that history? 1844, there's a US election. There's this divide between these two political parties, and that divide is whether or not they will admit or they will annex Texas from Mexico and admit it into the Union as a state. We discussed that in Portugal. So in 1844, when that election went on the wrong side of history, it led to the Mexican War just after 1844, and they annexed Texas. That whole history is absolutely crucial to that reform line, how America expanded. So that's the subject of 1848 that we're about to discuss. 1848. I'm not sure if we're familiar with the man John C. Calhoun. John C. Calhoun is quite legendary in that history. He's a senator from North Carolina, and he becomes a future spokesman for Southern secession. He was supportive of this American expansion into Texas. They want to take Texas from Mexico. They decide in the 1844 election, this is the path they're going to go down. American expansion. There was a phrase that began around that time, manifest destiny. It was the manifest destiny of the United States to spread it and take control over that whole from sea to shining sea. I want us to think about the branch that were talking about here. We're talking about this particularly Southern, particularly social conservative, supporting slavery, that's also supporting the expansion of the United States. John C. Calhoun, a senator from South Carolina, is a major part of that. I will quote him. He spoke in Congress January 4th of 1848. At that time, the US and Mexican diplomats were in the midst of a negotiating peace treaty. So 1844, the United States decides to annex Texas. Then the following year, they go to war with Mexico. It might be 1846. I might be off there, but they go to war with Mexico. In 1848, both parties come to the table and start to negotiate a peace treaty to determine how much of Mexico will be admitted into the Union.
Quoting Calhoun, how much of Mexico did the United States want? We have never dreamt of incorporating into our union any but the Caucasian race, the free white race. To incorporate Mexico would be the very first instance of the kind of incorporating an Indian race, for more than half of the Mexicans are Indians, and the other is composed chiefly of mixed tribes. I protest against such a union as that. Ours, sir, is the government of a white race. The great misfortunes of Spanish America are to be traced to the fatal error of placing these black races on equality with the white race. A way to associate ourselves as equals, companions, and fellow citizens, the Indians and mixed race of Mexico. Mr. President, I would consider such a thing fatal to our institutions. We make a great mistake, sir, when we suppose that all people are capable of self-government. We are anxious to force free government on all, and I see that it has been urged in a very respectable quarter that it is the mission of this country to spread civil and religious liberty all over the world, and especially over this continent. It is a great mistake. None but people advanced to a very high state of moral, and intellectual improvement are capable in a civilized state of maintaining free government. So I read that to my sister earlier this morning, and she responded in nonverbal communication, which I won't repeat on camera. Do we recognize what he's saying? I want us to think about the implications of that. The United States decides to take from Mexico. They could have taken more. They don't want more. Why do they not want Mexico? Because they're not white enough. It's racism in its beginning. What we're looking at is quite curious to me. It's like a reversal of literal to spiritual. What do we have today? We have a literal wall on a US-Mexican border to keep out who? People who essentially are not white enough. It's not just white and black, it's mixed race. It's the Southern American people as well. This wall that Donald Trump is building, it's his making of the same argument as they made in 1848 when they could have had Mexico and they chose to not have Mexico. They didn't want it. They didn't want it because it was composed of Indians and mixed race people largely. To admit more of Mexico into the Union would have meant to include those people as citizens of the United States and therefore dilute the white race. So they're going to argue against admitting more of Mexico into the Union.
We discussed Calhoun. He was a representative of,
Oh, you can. Oh, good there.
okay, representative of Southern Carolina. To many of the people there, Lincoln's victory was the signal that ended the state's tie to the Union. To them, it was the beginning of Southern independence. The day that Abraham Lincoln won the election, Southern Carolina lowered the United States flags and raised their state flag in its place. They were joyful. It was the beginning of Southern independence. It was the Southern states' attempt to secede based on the 10th Amendment argument that Lincoln's actions were designed to prevent this. This led to the Civil War. So what I want to explain in defending this position of states' rights is take you to the words of the states themselves. Every state in the Confederacy issued an article of succession declaring their break from the Union. 4 states went further than that: Texas, Mississippi, Georgia, and South Carolina. South Carolina, Calhoun, that link, all issued additional documents, usually deferred to as the declarations of causes, which explain to their decision to leave the Union. I'm going to read a little. I'm going to quote some of the words from these 4 states that wrote the declarations of succession. I'm going to start with Georgia. The people of Georgia, having dissolved their political connection with the government of the United States of America, present to the Confederates and the world the causes which have led to the separation. For the last 10 years, we have had numerous and serious causes of complaint against our non-slaveholding Confederate states, with referring to the subject of African slavery, our Northern Confederates, and a full and calm hearing of all the facts. After a fair warning of our purpose not to submit to the rule of the authors of all these wrongs and injuries, have by large majority committed the government of the United States into their hands. So they're referring back to the election of Abraham Lincoln. It's a grievance. The northern states have submitted the government into the hands of what these people see as abolitionists. The people of Georgia, after an equal effect, full and fair and deliberate hearing of the case, have declared with equal firmness that this government shall not rule over them. A brief history of the rise, progress, and policy of anti-slavery and the political organizations into whose hands the administration of the federal government has been committed, willfully justify the pronounced verdict of the people of Georgia. The party of Lincoln, called the Republican Party, under its present name and organization, is a recent origin. It is admitted to be a slavery party, while it attracts to itself by its creed for scattered advocates of exploited political heresies, of condemned theories in political economy, the advocates of commercial restrictions, of protections, of special privileges, of waste and corruption in the administration of government. Anti-slavery is its mission and its purpose. By anti-slavery, it is made a power of the state. The question of slavery was the great difficulty in the way the formation of the Constitution. With these principles on their banners and these utterances on their lips, the majority of the people of the North demand that we shall receive them as our rulers.
Remember what we said about Protestantism. about the nationalism that began to arise between the northern and the southern branches of the Baptist denomination. You're seeing the same thing now within the state governments. What the South is saying is that the North, by the large majority through that election, elected have elected a president who is opposed to slavery. It is an anti-slavery party in their mind, and he's going to violate the autonomy and the rights of the states. So it is a state rights argument that they're making. South Carolina said this most clearly. The people of the state of South Carolina in connection and convention assembled on the 26th day of April 1852. Going back to 1852, declared that the frequent violations of the Constitution of the United States by the federal government and its encroachment upon the reserved rights of the states fully justified in this state and then withdrawing from the federal union. Withdrawing from the federal union. So South Carolina wanted to withdraw from the union in 1852 because of this encroachment by the federal government upon a state's right, but in defense to the but indifference to the opinions and wishes of the other slaveholding states, she forbore at that time to exercise this right. Since that time, these encroachments have continued to increase, and further forbearance ceased to be a virtue. So, right back in 1952, they're protesting the encroachment of the federal government on the states, on states' rights. Yeah, this is supposed to be 1852, so that I think it's a typo. In the year 1765, they're going to go back. The portion of the British Empire embracing Great Britain undertook to make laws for the government of that portion composed of the 13 American colonies. So they're going to go back and say, you had Britain, the central government, and you had 13 colonies. A struggle for the right of these colonies to govern themselves ensured self-government, which resulted in 1776 in a declaration by the colonies, quoting the colonies that they are an all right, that ought to be free and independent states, and that as free and independent states, they have full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and to do all the other acts and things which independent states may have the right to do. They further solemnly declared that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of the ends for which it was established, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it, and to institute a new government, deeming the government of Great Britain to have become destructive of these ends. They declared that the colonies are absolved from all alliances to the British Crown, and that all political connections between them and the states of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. So South Carolina is saying, we are repeating the American Revolution for independence, and the argument is the right of the colonies or the state to freely govern themselves. In pursuance of this Declaration of Independence, each of the 13 states proceed to exercise separate sovereignty adopted for itself in a constitution and appointed officers for the administration of the government in all of its departments, legislative, executive, and judicial. For purpose of defense, they united their arms and their councils, and in 1778 they entered into a league known as the Articles of Confederation, whereby they agreed to entrust the administration of their external relations to a common agent known as the Congress of the United States, expressly declaring in the first article that each state retains its sovereignty, freedom, and independence, and every power, jurisdiction, and right which is not by this Confederation, as expressly delegated to the United States in Congress, is assembled.
Under this confederation, the War of the Revolution was carried on, and on the 3rd of September 1783, the contest ended, and a treaty was signed by Great Britain, in which she acknowledged the independence of the colonies in the following terms. His Britannic Majesty, this is Article 1, acknowledges the United States and it names the colonies to be free, sovereign, independent states, that he treats them with them as such, and for himself, his heirs, and successors, relinquishes all claims to the government, propriety, and territorial rights. Thus were established by the two great principles asserted by the colonies, namely, the right of a state to govern itself, and the rights of a people to abolish a government when it becomes destructive of the ends for which it was instituted. And concurrent with the establishment of these principles was in fact that each colony became and was recognized by the mother country in writing a free, sovereign, independent state. In the present case, that fact is established with certainty. We assert that 14 of the states have deliberately used for past years to fulfill their constitutional obligations, and we refer to their own statutes for the proof. Says, for 25 years, this agitation has been increasing until it has now secured to its aid the power of the common government. A sectional party has found within that article establishing the executive department, the presidency, Abraham Lincoln, the means of subverting the Constitution itself. A geographical line has been drawn across the Union, and all the states north of that line have united in the election of a man to the high office of President of the United States, whose opinions and purposes are hostile to slavery. The guarantees of the Constitution will then no longer exist. The equal rights of the states will be lost, states' rights. The slaveholding states will no longer have the power of self-government or self-protection, and the federal government will have become their enemy. So we've quoted from Georgia and South Carolina, and what are they arguing for? They're arguing against that it violates their freedom and it violates their state rights. The reason people don't like to talk about state rights is because it's usually used by those who defend the South as an excuse. They say they were defending the rights of the states. It wasn't about slavery. They try and make the South look better in this argument. So then those opposed to or for equality, their reaction is, it had nothing to do with state rights. It was about slavery. The truth is, it was about state rights because that was their excuse to defend slavery. The issue was slavery. If they didn't want slavery, they would have never had a problem with Abraham Lincoln and their state rights. So the issue is slavery. I'm not denying that, but their defense of that institution is going to be their independent rights and states. Short quote from Texas. It essentially says quite the same thing. This acquiring of sufficient power in the common government is a means of destroying the institutions of Texas and the sister slaveholding states. So this executive branch, this government that South Carolina described as Great Britain, has a quiet enough power that it's going to destroy the independence, the institutions of Texas, and the other slaveholding states. In all the non-slaveholding states, in violation of that good faith and comity, which should exist between entirely distinct nations, the people have formed themselves into a great sectional party.
So they're saying for a non-slaveholding state where they should exist as entirely distinct nations have united under Abraham Lincoln. So they're going to accuse the North of not defending their own state rights in forming this government. They're saying that these states should have how much freedom? The states should be as if they were entire distinct nations. The people have fought, have made themselves strong enough in numbers to control the affairs of the other states, the southern states, based upon an unnatural feeling of hostility to these southern states and their beneficent and patriarchal system of African slavery, proclaiming the debasing doctrines of equality of all men, irrespective of race or color, that debasing doctrine of equality, a doctrine at war with nature, in opposition to the experience of mankind and in violation of the plainest revelations of divine law.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
I don't know if it's a question. Well, it is kind of a question. So is this like saying, so the South is arguing that states' rights, we have, each individual state has the right to choose and do what they want to do. It's our decision. And so in arguing such, they kind of try to hide the slavery issue, but that's what it was about. But if I
Yes.
understand correctly, what they're saying is here, we're exercising our state rights. Hey, you go ahead and exercise yours too. You have the right to be free however you want to be as well. Is that what they're kind of saying?
Yeah, and it sounds like they try to go overboard to say that the states should be as if they were entire distinct nations.
Yeah, so it's kind of, I don't know how to put it into words, what makes me think of little kids trying to argue for something, and they're using their argument to try to say, hey, go ahead, you get this liberty too. You get to do what you want to do. That's kind of what's going through my head when you were reading this.
Yeah, and they took it as so far, like, I mean, this
Oh,
word, this
flattery.
it says a doctrine at war with nature. So the doctrine of equality is at war with nature, meaning, if God created black people and he created white people, God must have wanted that distinction, and we should not try to, separate or blend that distinction because God created it. So they're really going literal. I mean,
It sounds like little kids who are saying one kid's doing all the naughty stuff and he's trying to make the naughty stuff look good by saying, hey, you can do this naughty thing too. I don't know if that made sense, but that's what I'm kind of watching these little kids playing in the background to justify what they're doing.
yeah, exactly.
And make it look like a good thing.
Yeah, but you notice how at the beginning, those Southern Baptists, they were actually, fighting for the right thing, but then they started to compromise,
Yeah.
right? And then eventually they started saying that, no, this is God's divine law. God instituted slavery, so, so they compromised and they completely just, did away with their with their doctrine and what they were standing for.
The same thing's kind of happening today that was happening there with, I view it as these things happening, like say you're embedded in this understanding, you're embedded in this belief, it's ingrained in you and it's a part of your life and you don't know any different. You could be as religious as however and be going to church and all of that and not know, just like us, not know that what you were doing is wrong. So the compare and contrasting that the Lord has given us and gave them to bring it to a place where they had the opportunity to see it. It always reminds me of Moses going to Pharaoh, and then the plagues coming down, and one by one those plagues were destroying Egypt. And so we're like watching one by one these different things today that are happening. People are, some people are waking up, like some of the Egyptians woke up to seeing, wait a second, we're being destroyed. Something's wrong here. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's really, I mean, it shows us what's ahead. I mean, we like Elder Tess made that presentation where the compromiser, right? Biden, he will compromise with the other side, right?
Yeah, he'll make no radical changes and just believes in going through things slow and progressively, kind of like they did then, that eventually slavery will just go away. Eventually the problem will just fix itself.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Okay, so the other argument they're going to argue for, religious liberty. We have defended in our prior presentation the fact that the South used the claim of religious liberty as their right to practice what they believed God had mandated slavery as an excuse for the Civil War. So there you go. They're saying you got to give us our religious liberty. If we believe slavery is biblical, then that's my religious liberty to practice. They believe slavery was instituted from the beginning in ancient Israel through the New Testament times, and as the United States was the glorious land, they would have institutionalized slavery, and to abolish it would be to violate their own religious liberty.
And so what were the Hebrews doing in Egypt?
Well, they were in bondage, and they were slaves, right?
Yeah, so they're slaves, and Moses goes and tells Pharaoh, let my people go. He wants to free
Okay,
them from
yes,
slavery.
I see what you're saying. Yes.
Yeah, and it's interesting because they use slavery because, okay, Abraham did have slaves, and you can definitely prove that. But why don't we go look at what the Hebrews were doing? What was God saving them from?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah, exactly.
They were seeking freedom and speaking against slavery.
Yeah.
Yeah, so they just looked at one side of the story, but ignored other sides.
Because it suited their own agenda.
Yeah.
Right.
Okay, so what I want, what's that?
I was just saying the heart is desperately wicked, so it suits what's in the heart.
The depths of sin run deep within us.
Yeah.
So what I want us to see in this history, as this issue of slavery grows and develops, these two branches of Protestantism splitting first as denominations, then it heads and the states themselves split. It's over this nationalism that was developed. What you have is the South defending all the way through this history, whether it's the Southern Baptists or whether it's South Carolina, but what is being impinged upon is their freedom and their religious liberty. Once you get to 1861, they're going to say that this core government is impinging on the rights of the states to govern themselves. So we'll close now. When we come back, I want us to keep tracking this history. We'll move beyond slavery and see how this dividing Protestantism continues to develop. If you kneel with me, we'll close in prayer.
Really good. Makes me want to go back and I got to go back and go through the Ninja Turtles and did I say that right? The ninjas. Why did I say Ninja Turtles? Excuse me. Kids. I had kids.
And then just sheep.
Thank you. Forgive me. Had kids, you know.
Yeah.
The ninja sheep, and also the other one that you were talking about. Do I have the right? Do I have the freedom? And then everybody got that document that she sent out. I think Sister Christine was nice enough to send it to me, and for some reason or other, I couldn't get them to send both together, but Sister Christine did. But I couldn't get your graph for the meeting to copy in easily without a lot of work, so I had to send them separate. But we have time to, not tonight, I don't mean, but personally, to try to go through those documents, because we really need to understand all these aspects of what was going on, because all of it is speaking to us today. This whole issue of equality.
So, real quick, so this cyber attack by I know I'm jumping subjects a little bit, that took place, what was it, this week or last week?
Yeah, last week, I think.
Last week with Russia. How does that? We know that plays a role in this upcoming war, Panium. Could this be one of the like transition what heads that direction? Has anyone talked about that?
I follow some of the discussions that Brother Itabo has with a few others, and they discuss it some too. I mean, it surely seems to have play a big role. And if we think about Panium, because that's the other thing, there's so many different things that we have to understand all at once. You know what I mean? And to understand that at Panium, the king of the north goes against the king of the south, and the king of the south receives his deadly wound. So right now what we have is Trump saying everything is all great,
Yeah.
all under control, and Biden's going to inherit that mess. And so, I mean, it would seem, based on what we know as we head into Panium, that the king of the north is going to do something about what he did. I don't know if it's specifically linked to that, but the other thing I know, and it's funny because when I went back through a couple of presentations, I think we can all say this happens to us. There's so many things we miss, but we need to review, I think, as well, the studies that were done. Mainly, I think Elder Parmenter did these ones on the history of the original version, if that's the way to say. I think the first generation version of Daniel 11:40. What we went through in all those notes on Islam, where we went through the Syrian War, the first Syrian War, second Syrian War, those 10 years, I should remember the dates, 1831 to 1841, I believe. And then we need to understand the ending of that Syrian War as well, and that understanding, because this is also going to relate to Islam as well. Because when you take that original understanding, what you have is Islam involved in that. So there's a lot of things to try to juggle and understand each piece. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I was reading some articles, and this cyber attack was considered probably one of the most elaborate, like sophisticated attacks. I mean, on all the facets, like what was it? Energy, all the so many sections of the government were targeted, and they were in there for quite some time. So this was like a big attack.
It's still there, from what I understand, because he's not doing anything about it. I read that they were comparing it to Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Wow. So I mean, this is, as soon as I heard that, I was like, wow, this is leading to Panium. I mean, this is really big.
But the thing that Islam fits in there, if I remember it correctly, because when the king of the south goes, that's when the restraint is on Islam. Did I say that right? I have to go back through the notes myself as well, because that restraint will eventually be removed from Islam.
Another
Go ahead, Sister Christine.
Another thing we have to remember is that the King of the South, doesn't he lose by his own invention, his own,
Information war.
yeah. So
Yeah.
the things that he's been doing will have to turn on him. It's not going to be the King of the North himself, but that destroys him, but the King of the South's own weapons will
Right.
destroy him.
It's like from our uprising from within, like its own people are gonna bring it
Well,
down.
when you look at 1989 to 91, when she makes the point in several studies that where was the United States when the Berlin Wall fell? It wasn't there. It was what the United States played a role in causing the revolt of the people that brought about the destruction from within. So, so you take that history to look at it. You take the history of understanding the kings, the King of the North, the King of the South, and those battles. You take also and factor in the first generation understanding of Daniel 1140 and the restraint of Islam, and yeah, there's just a whole lot of things to factor in there to try to understand what it's going to be. So yeah, Sister Christine's point is there too, is that it'll be his own weapon that will, just like with that's from the line of Pyrrhus, that his own weapon destroyed him.
Yes, comment to that, Sister Elaine. I noticed that as I read Acts, well, we're studying it now. It's so important to really put those together, what we've had with the lines
Yeah.
and through ships, because the application was, some of that application of Pyrrhus, it was given in the study last Friday. That was study number 7, I believe, from Acts 27.
Yeah.
And there's 15 studies, so it was the 7th one. And there's some application there that's applying to where we are, compare and contrast it. But there's an application there, because Sister Christine, you did that study. You read that study because I didn't have internet. And to the group on Friday. And I don't know if you remember, I mean, putting the thoughts together, we're just being reminded of where we are and where we're going. I see that Biden is not, he is not going to cooperate with Putin in any way. So there's just going to be a complete, probably cutoff from the United States to Russia. And also the people, it showed in that study number 7 that the people rose up in 1989. And the history of that is there on the application. It came from within. It did not come from without, with the King of the North doing any kind of attack on them. So that couldn't we look in our time now to see what's happening, as we go forward into 21 and President Biden? Because we know that the shipwreck occurs in Panium. So if there's any comments to kind of where I'm at and what I'm thinking right now and what we're looking at is, if there's anybody else who has anything they can add to it. I think I threw out bits and pieces, but it is all coming together, slow but sure, as we review and as we hear these more recent studies from Elder Tess, and we can begin to see a fuller picture of what's really happening and what to expect as we go into this new year.
Yeah, so they did a special on I was listening to news radio as I was driving today, and they took Trump's speech from yesterday or today. I don't know. He did it his most recent speech, and at the very end, he mentioned a phrase that he's going to come back in 2024. And so the radio host he took that phrase and said, "See, what that means is that he's coming back in 2024." So I thought that was, I don't know, interesting how
Yeah, I know it's been said, and he's already pushing to, with all of the people that did vote for him, as he got 74 million votes. So, he has a strong following of people that would support him in 2024. But Elder Tess mentioned that it could be Ted Cruz and not him.
exactly. I mean, Trump had his time, and the mentality of the people may change, and somebody else may come over and take it from him.
Yes, exactly.
It's still Trump's. Yeah, his term put America on an irreversible course. Like Trump is the last president in the sense that is the last president that sets America on an irreversible course.
Yes.
So in that sense, he's the last president. Not that he's the last president of the United States.
Yes, very true. Yeah, the seeds have already been sown, as from the direction that the United States is going now, and it was there before Trump. He began to, go in his certain way that he was going, and which created this whole thing with nationalism. It really came to the fore with Trump. So, but it was there all along. It was there back, as this study brings out, this nationalistic thinking
It was
and
there.
this expansionism and all. It was already there.
It was there. Trump just came along, and he just kind of he just like took it to a next. It was there, but they needed somebody like Trump.
I think he's the one that radicalized it all.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, only his personality, what do they call it? Occultic cult personality.
Yeah.
And where the people actually, just worshiped him.
Yeah.
And that's why he got all the votes that he got, regardless of what kind of person he is, his character. The people just think that there was nothing else like him, that he was really freeing America from all of this bondage we've been in. This picture he painted. Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to understand how people can really see it in that light, but I mean, we know this is the two sides that are developing now.
It's interesting.
And we're not even on the two sides. We're on God's side. So
yeah, it's interesting too to watch what he's doing today with that, how he's using this COVID aid. And I mean, I mentioned this to Larry as well, that it seems like him putting the brakes on this and demanding $2,000 for the people. He's a very vengeful person, and he demands 100% loyalty. And as the electors did their vote, and then Mitch McConnell, who has a lot of power, stands up and tells the Senate, he congratulates Biden and says it's over and we need to now move on. And he encourages the Senate, the Republicans, to go along with him and accept it. And so now you've got these two power heads, one that cannot handle defeat, and having anybody have more power than him. And I think he's angry and lashing out. And since those two senator seats in Georgia are up for grabs, that this boxes, I think, the Republicans into a corner that he's trying to demand that they support him by doing this, because those two seats are now going to be up in the air, because his base is going to I would think, like the idea that, that's what I'm hearing anyways, that they like the idea of that $2,000.
Yeah.
And so, and it brings him up, if it happens, it brings him up to be a hero, which is what he wants. He wants to look like the guy that did everything for you. So it seems like it's a what's the word, revenge on the Republicans for not being 100% loyal to him. And so
Yeah,
it boxes them
go-
in order to have to do something if they want to win those seats in now that this is out on the table. If they want to win those seats in the Senate, they may have to go along with what he's saying.
well, did he sign an executive order on that? Can he do that? Or,
There's
on this 2,000 that he says, and forget everything else that they Congress came up with,
yeah,
with their big stimulus package, which wasn't that big anyway. It was quite smaller than what they expected it was going to be.
no. So there's
But he didn't sign an executive order on that 2,000 so that he can override what Congress is voting on or is voted on.
Yeah, what I've heard is that that they have enough support that they can overdo his veto. He did
Okay.
the defense bill today, and he's demanding that the COVID relief bill have things removed from it and put that $2,000 in there. Because think about it, where's he been all this time? And he had been saying because I know I've heard it reported months ago that he wanted $2,000 to go to people, and the Republicans wouldn't have it. But he laid low, and he really didn't seem to get involved, the best that I saw. Maybe somebody else saw it different, but I didn't really see him ever really get involved. And then here now, after it's all final, after all these months of fighting back and forth, they settle on something, even though I don't agree with it's not enough. But I also don't think that it should go to everybody anyways. It should be more money going to the people that need it instead of everybody.
Yeah.
But here he jumps in after they go through all that and does that. And the other thing, his supporters are rampant on Facebook and social media, posting all kinds of memes talking about all these billions of dollars that go to the Pakistan and all these different nations, and then the American people get $600. And it's just, you're not comparing apples to apples when you do it that way. You should take that $600 times however many people are going to get $600, and that number is the number that should be there. And that's how blind they are to when they look at him. I don't know if that made sense.
Yeah, it does. Well, I was with a friend today, and she's very much looking at it. In fact, I'm not getting a lot of this information because I don't have internet. And she was saying, well, it's, as we were talking, the lobbyists work on, we know, our government, to get funds to go to different countries and whatnot. And so why is he coming up with this plan to do this, like you just said, right at this time? What's the timing of all of this, when he was laying low all these weeks now? So she seemed to think it was a good deal that some of these people didn't get all the money, all this big bailout package for themselves. So, and that we need to keep the money here in America and not spread it out to all these other countries, because we have a lot of people that aren't doing well either here. And why are we helping others?
And I think, if I understood correctly, the money that was talked about going to all these different nations, and I don't know, maybe somebody else has more light on this, but I saw some articles that were saying that the comparison that they were doing that is because they put that, is it called omnibus? Is that how the spending bill for the year?
Yeah.
And so that's the money that they're claiming is part of COVID relief. And I think there was I think that was the distinction, that all those different countries getting money was part of that omnibus, but
Oh, okay.
not the
Yeah.
COVID relief. Now, you might want to look that up to verify that that's all completely accurate, but I know I read reports on that. So, I mean, that's how nobody searches any facts. They don't search any facts whatsoever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Take what the president tweets, because he's the one that started that. If I recall right, I think he put out a tweet that said that all this money going to different countries, and then everybody else ran with it. And it didn't have to do with the COVID relief bill. And I was thinking about that a lot too, because he also talked about how the arts and different
Yes, that too.
well, but I was thinking about that though too, because, and I don't know if anybody saw this, like, I don't go in and read up on these articles, but I catch the headlines because I'm constantly working on the internet. But Tom Cruise, there was reporting on him. He went off on some of the people in the movie they're producing while they're filming the movie because they broke COVID protocol. And the way I understood what happened is he went off because on them, because these people, as long as they're able to make movies, there's people that are still at work. Because, we might just think of, or did when we watched movies, as is just, we just see what we see on the screen, but we don't think about all the people that are employed in doing so. Does that make sense? So I was
Yes.
thinking about that with the arts thing, and their complaint about why do we got to save that? I mean, I don't know for sure, but it seems like it might have something to do with also with jobs as well and helping people. So I bet, I don't know, I could be wrong on that.
Well, yeah, because Washington Times, not the Washington Times, but the New York Times. I saw the article last night, and I need to read it again because it's going into all this detail. They have a lot of detail on this thing with what's happening with the jobs, and the job problem there is that they shut them down because of the COVID. So many people in the arts and drama and all that have lost their jobs.
So it does have to do with
So,
keeping their jobs then.
yes, it does.
Yeah, I think that
Yeah, if you
and I don't know how anybody else feels about this, but I've said it to my kids, and I'll go ahead and say it here. And I never tell anybody what to do, but I am, for my own self, I am very grateful that I've remained employed and that my customers still are doing well because their business just happens to survive these kind of things. So if they survive means I survive. So my bills have been paid. I've been able to do what I need to do. I have what I need. And to me, to take that $600 and just go whatever, I don't need it. You know what I mean? And
yes,
I would love to see,
I
since they're not doing it the way that this is just my opinion, but to me, to send out $600 to everybody as opposed to a big chunk of money to people that don't, can't even put food on the table or don't have a roof over their head to have food. You know what I'm saying? That
exactly.
them. So yeah, so I am actually taking mine, going to give it and to find somewhere to take it to help people. And that's what I did with the last one. And anyway, I mean, back in the day, I wouldn't have been that way. I would have just thought, oh, free money. You know what I mean?
Yeah, sure.
I have to think it was free, but I would have just thought that way. But I'm really thankful for the work that the Lord is doing on our hearts, each one of us individually,
Amen.
because I definitely
Yes.
have done something for myself. And so, yeah, it makes me feel really bad that what if a person I've struggled. I've never suffered, but I've always struggled. And so if you had been struggling and been out of work for months and barely, however you make it, I don't know how they're making it. And you don't have enough to do what you need to do, and say you're behind 3, 4, 5, 6 or whatever months on your rent or what have you, what is $600?
Nothing.
Nothing.
It's not going to help.
It doesn't help.
That's gone in a moment.
I mean, I've kind of had days like that, or months, years like that. It's like, that won't even help.
Oh, it's sad. Yeah, this is the time when we, you know, by God's grace, we have this empathy in our hearts for what we see and all this suffering that's going on. Irregardless of, yes, look, people view these circumstances in different ways, but bits and pieces of it that they understand. And but what's important is what side we fall on. You know, do we fall on the side of really true empathy, like Christ has, like his Father to that character?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is a testing time. That, oh, we have everything, God is taking care of us. But what about all these people that are suffering? You know, we
Yeah.
might not be able to help them all, but we certainly can just, have that only placed by God in our hearts to feel for others.
Yeah. Brother Victor, I am very thankful, Sister Leanne and Sister Nancy. And I think you said that the Sister Adriana, did you say she's there too?
No, my sister's not here.
Okay. Well, I'm really glad you guys joined us. And I pray to be able to see you soon. I know that Sister Leanne is on the schedule. I pray to see Sister Nancy join us. We'll make it as easy as possible to get started. And so that we're ready to go, so that we have our whatever fears we might have or discomfort in it, that we get comfortable with it now while we have the time. So that, I think about Ezekiel, when even Ezekiel, the prophet, didn't want to go do what he had to do. I mean, the other day I was really kind of just picturing the reality, because Panium is coming up at the end of the year. Hey, what's right upon us, right? And what is it going to look like when we go, whether they will hear or whether they will forbear, and that they're a stiff-necked people and all the mocking. Are we ready for that? We need to really contemplate these things and ask the Lord to do whatever it takes to get us ready for those things so that we don't turn and run away.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you. We look forward to participating more, including my mom. I know that she does also. And I apologize to everyone that we didn't do a better, more thorough job with the editing.
Hey,
You did great.
you have no problem.
Yes.
I'm the
Amen.
making those mistakes. So if I didn't do so bad, we wouldn't have to do so much work on Guadalupe presentations. Thank you, Sister Susan and Sister Christine and everybody else, Sister Lana and Linda and Jonathan. So, but we're working on that, getting that together. So hopefully by the first of the year, we get to send it off. I don't know if we're going to be there on that quite deadline, but soon after we'll be ready. But I really appreciate you guys being here. Really, we love having you with us.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
We love to be here.
If you guys want to, somebody want to close in prayer, and then I do want to talk about something real briefly after we close in prayer.
Father in heaven, Lord, we ask that you would please forgive us for our sins. We pray that you would send the Holy Spirit to fill our hearts and help us to overcome those sins by your grace, your strength, and your help, Lord. Please continue to be with each and every one of us. Fill us with your righteousness, your kindness, honesty, long-suffering, humbleness. Give us a meek spirit. Fill us with your truth and your light, Lord. Please help us continue to search and seek after your words and your message for these end times, and continue to use each of us according to your will, Lord. Help us do our part that we may be empty vessels for you to fill for your purpose. We thank you for this study tonight. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Amen.